Scream came out in 1996 and changed the horror game forever. I don't really need to tell you because you already know, but it had sharp satirical wit and a subversive storyline that would dare to change the status quo of slasher movies forever. Scream was written by a man named Kevin Williamson. Scream is his first screenwriting credit. He would then go on to write I Know What You Did Last Summer, Scream 2, and then in 1998, he dared to make Scream again. A movie called The Faculty. Another deconstruction of a horror subgenre. This time, it was the alien invasion body snatching kind of movie. And to some, it didn't pay homage or it wasn't satire. It was just a clear ripoff. Variety called it a rip-snorting hunk of giddy, self-aware genre trash. Latest Invasion of the Body Snatchers remodel. And that's what most reviews I can find of the time say, that it is extremely formulaic, copies from other movies, but is also just really fun to watch, so go check it out. So what went wrong? What's the difference between a satire and a ripoff? And is there even such thing as a ripoff in the first place? Scream isn't a ripoff. It has a wholly original plot, but it does follow some tropes, like the teenage girl getting murdered at the very beginning. But this trope is subverted with the phone call and then the trivia game, her boyfriend's outside. Not to mention the fact that the audience themselves thought Drew Barrymore was going to be the main character of the movie due to posters and promotions. So then when they find out she's dead, that's a whole other subversion. It's surprise, Sydney is actually the main character. Then there's the trope of the love interest being the killer. And Scream subverts this by him faking his death, and there being two killers, actually. It still follows the trope, but it's doing it in a surprising, never-before-seen way. Scream even acknowledges the rules you need to follow in order to survive a horror movie in the very meta scene where they're watching Halloween. The first rule is don't have sex. If you have sex, you'll die. And guess what Sydney does? She has sex. Not only that, but with the killer. And she lives. Scream specifically set up the rules in order to break them. That's what makes it satire. So what about The Faculty? I'll recap the plot in case you haven't seen it, because it is not as popular as Scream. Basically, it's a group of 6 high school students who all suspect that their school is being overtaken by some alien parasite infecting people's brains, and it's their job to stop it. And in The Faculty, there's also a scene where they sort of go over the rules of an alien invasion movie, but they only specifically reference Invasion of the Body Snatchers and nothing else. They basically go, hey, this thing happens in Invasion of the Body Snatchers, so therefore it is true in the scenario we're in right now. One of the rules they come up with is that once you kill the queen, then everyone else goes back to normal. And yeah, that's what happens in the movie. That's what the students do. They go find the queen, they kill her, everything goes back to normal. There's no subversion of that. Sure, it's a bit subversive on who the queen is, and it's a fun kind of whodunit part in that plot, but at the same time, you set up the rule, and you followed it, unlike Scream. What was most interesting to me is a scene that takes place in Josh Hartnett's drug lab. Don't ask, we'll get there later. But the kids have discovered that if you give an alien some of Josh Hartnett's homemade drugs, they'll have an allergic reaction to it and die. And so to all 6 kids, they're suspicious of one another if anyone's been infected. So they all promise to take the drugs to prove to each other that they're not infected. And I was like, oh, wow, that's a fun scene. But then I'm like, wait a minute. This is just the scene from The Thing. If you don't know what I'm talking about, in the movie The Thing, there's a shape-shifting alien that takes over a research base and in Antarctica, and in order to prove that none of the people are the shapeshifter, they all draw each other's blood and then hold it up to heat, because the alien does not respond well to heat, and then that's how you prove if you're the shapeshifter or not. And so they do the exact same scene in this movie. Sure, they're using drugs instead of fire, which is funny, and Elijah Wood's character ends up taking too much drugs, and that's a really funny beat in the scene. But overall, it's not subverting anything. If anything, it's just sort of redoing a scene from another movie. Some people online have called this an homage to The Thing, but the connections page on IMDb calls it a direct recreation. Then I realized sort of the most interesting part. Kevin Williamson loves to name drop other movies in his movies. They do it a lot in the Scream franchise, and they do it in The Faculty, but they never bring up the movie The Thing. They mention Invasion of the Body Snatchers like a lot, but they also mention The Puppet Master, E.T., Alien, Star Wars, Stargate, Star Trek, Independence Day, Men in Black, The X-Files, and Schindler's List. And nowhere is The Thing mentioned. Now, the movies I just listed, they mainly list for like one-liner quips. What they're really just going off of the whole time, like I said, is Invasion of the Body Snatchers, which is kind of weird. It's like if in Scream, they only based the rules off of Halloween, and they're like, hey, Jamie Lee Curtis did this in the movie Halloween, so we should do this right now. And then they would only follow the Halloween movie because it was the first slasher movie. Oh wait, I don't think that's true.
None of the above. Peeping Tom, 1960, directed by Michael Powell. First movie to ever put the audience in the killer's POV.
Part of me thinks that maybe it's because Kevin Williamson is like a bit ashamed to name drop the movie he is taking direct inspiration from. Even the visuals of the alien look very similar to the one in The Thing, with sort of the tentacle motif going on. And even there's a part in The Faculty where an alien gets their head cut off, and then it looks like that. Obviously, the concept and the execution are so far from The Thing, I would never actually accuse Kevin Williamson of like plagiarism or anything, but I do think it is just sort of weird how there is so little nuance to this movie after he already did Scream. It's a very standard alien invasion movie, but what sets it apart from the rest is the acting, the hilarious dialogue, and the realistic stunts. I mean, just look at Elijah Wood fall right here. Speaking of Elijah Wood, I'd say his character is the biggest subversion to this movie. He plays just sort of a typical scrawny, socially awkward nerd named Casey. And spoilers, he's the last one left alive who can take down the alien queen. Juxtapose this with MacReady from The Thing, and they're just polar opposites. MacReady is the embodiment of a stoic, badass, masculine man. Some would even call him hyper-masculine, because The Thing has no female characters in it, and I think that is sort of my biggest complaint personally with the movie, is sort of the lack of characterization. All the characters are sort of all these like masculine cool guys, and even when you have a woman like Ripley, an alien, she's still a pretty stoic badass. And then when you look at Casey, he's none of those things. He's a clumsy, bumbling kind of nerd who's not even the smartest character in the movie. So it's not like he has to use his extreme smarts that gives him a heads up against the alien. No, he's perfectly average. Like, there's really nothing that special about him, and that's sort of the point. Near the end of the movie, the queen is trying to convince him to become infected, because they say once he's infected, he'll become everything that he's not. He'll become this like stronger, cooler, masculine guy. He'll become MacReady, but he doesn't choose that, as tempting as it may be for him in a high school setting. While we're talking about it, I'd also like to give a shout out to the other nuanced male characters in this movie, because like I said, they're not really that nuanced in The Thing. My favorite is probably Stan, played by Sean Hattasey. He is the star quarterback for the football team. Everyone loves him. He's super popular. He helps win the team all the games. But at the beginning of the movie, he decides to quit the team. In one of my favorite scenes, he explains why he decided to quit, and it's because he was being treated differently, and he didn't want that. Not only by the peers, like treating him as some cool popular guy, but also by the teachers. He recalls a story of one day he got a C on a test, but the teacher rounded it up to an A because he helped win the football game against the school's rivals in the previous day. And he said, I worked hard for that C. I deserve that C, and I want it. He genuinely wants to change himself for the better, and I can't really think of another example of a male jock in a horror movie that has sort of this level of emotional intelligence. And it's not even like he's some prodigy at math or science or even musical theater. No, he's bad at all those things, and he just genuinely wants to get better. Then there's Zeke, who's played by Josh Hartnett. He's a burnout super senior who deals his own drugs that he makes. The subversion there is that he's really smart, probably the smartest character in the movie, because once they go back to his lab, because yeah, he's smart chemistry-wise, making his own stuff, but he's able to dissect the alien parasite and know a lot of exposition about it in a very short time, which can be a bit of a plot convenience, yes. But hey, at least he's a pretty cool three-dimensional character. The male characters in this movie are so well defined, and the male characters in The Thing, their only personality trait is really just man. The female characters in this movie just don't get as much screen time. They're not as complicated or nuanced, but I will give a shout out to Stokely, played by Clea Duvall. Her character is that she's like a goth outsider who everyone thinks is a lesbian, but then the subversion there is she's straight. I've been harping on Kevin Williamson a lot in this video, and so I want to take the time to say I think he's genuinely a great writer, and his long career proves it, and he's especially good at that character work of making us fall in love with these three-dimensional, in-depth characters within genre movies. So the characters are different, the setting is different, the time period is different. So is that enough to say, hey, this isn't a ripoff of The Thing or Invasion of the Body Snatchers, it's something completely new? Well, the movie sort of acknowledges this. Casey brings up to Stokely the idea that the movie Invasion of the Body Snatchers could have been based on real events, but then Stokely sort of laughs it off, saying that can't even be possible because Invasion of the Body Snatchers was a ripoff of a pre-existing book called The Puppet Masters, which was a novel published in 1951, 3 years before the first Invasion of the Body Snatchers movie. What Williamson is doing here is, yes, lampshading a little bit, but also calling into the question who owns what ideas. I don't see The Faculty as a ripoff of Invasion of the Body Snatchers. I see it as what 10 Things I Hate About You is to Taming of the Shrew, what The Lion King is to Hamlet, what Clueless is to Emma, and what Romeo and Juliet is. Maybe not that one. Pretty much like a modern day retelling of that same story, but they change the characters and the setting, and they kind of have to change a lot of it because what it's based off of isn't in the public domain, and so you kind of have to legally do that. Sure, the movie is formulaic at times, but it has Kevin Williamson's signature style and spin on it that no one else can replace. If you still think this movie is a ripoff in any kind, the movie's messaging is actually the exact opposite. The movie spreads a message of diversity and non-uniformity. Before the aliens take over, we see this high school filled with cliques and jocks and bullies and couples fighting. But once the aliens invade, things change. Their goal is no conflict, but in order to achieve that, they have to get rid of everyone's identity. Sure, all the cliques are getting along now, but at what expense? Everyone is the same. Everyone now has the same personality about them. And the aliens are only defeated by a group of 6 vastly different teenagers who all come from different backgrounds who join together for a common goal. And that's what this movie is advocating for. We as humans are stronger when we're different from one another. We can't all be the same. Sure, that would make things safe, but we wouldn't be human. There's beauty in our differences, so be different. And hey, if you like the writer Kevin Williamson, I just put out a video where I predict the plot of Scream 7 and what is he going to do with it. Because if you didn't know, he's writing Scream 7 and directing it. And if you want to maybe know my prediction for that movie, check out this video right here.